The rain had been relentless, drenching the streets in a cold, unforgiving downpour. A darkened alley, slick with water and mud, seemed to swallow the sounds of the bustling city outside. Anna stood at the corner, her eyes scanning the night, clutching her coat tightly around her. She wasn't supposed to be out this late, but she couldn't ignore the soft, pitiful sound of someone crying. There, in the dim glow of a streetlight, was a figure slumped against the wet wall, a foreign diplomat, lost and confused, with nowhere to turn. His once pristine suit was now ruined by the soaked fabric clinging to his body, his face gaunt with exhaustion. She stepped closer, her heart tightening at the sight of him. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. He looked up, his eyes wide, startled, as if he hadn't expected anyone to care. I'm lost. I don't know where to go." Anna paused, trying to gather her thoughts, her mind racing. She was just an ordinary woman, widowed, struggling with her own demons. What could she possibly offer him? Yet something inside her stirred, a sense of duty, an understanding of loss. "You're in luck," she said, extending a hand. "I'll help you." Anna guided the diplomat through the rain, leading him out of the alley and into the quiet of the street. He stumbled a few times, disoriented, but she steadied him each time. She didn't speak much, unsure of what to say, but she could feel the weight of his unease pressing in on her. He wasn't just lost physically, there was something deeper in his eyes, something broken. They reached the small cafe where she had been headed, the warm light spilling out into the street. She pushed open the door and led him inside. The barista behind the counter looked up, surprised to see a drenched foreign diplomat, and the familiar face of Anna. "What's going on?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I found him outside, lost in the rain," Anna said quietly. "Can you make him something warm?" The barista didn't ask any more questions. She simply nodded and started working. Anna turned back to the diplomat. "Sit down," she said softly. "I'll get you a hot drink." Anna sat across from the diplomat at the table, the quiet hum of the cafe filling the space between them. The warmth from the mug in front of him was slowly seeping into his cold, trembling hands. He hadn't said much since they entered, his gaze distant, lost in his own thoughts. Anna didn't press him for answers, she knew the weight of silence all too well. She sipped her coffee, watching him as he tried to regain some semblance of composure. Finally, the diplomat looked up at her, his eyes still uncertain, yet filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Anna offered him a small smile, but there was sadness behind it. "It's nothing," she replied. "Just trying to help." The silence between them stretched again, but it wasn't as heavy as before. There was something unspoken, an understanding that passed between them, two strangers brought together by an unlikely set of circumstances. Yet, in that moment, Anna felt as though they weren't so different after all. Both of them were broken in their own ways, just searching for a little kindness in the storm. The rain had slowed down, but the air was still thick with the lingering cold. Anna and the diplomat sat in silence for a few moments longer, both unsure of how to bridge the gap between them. Finally, the diplomat placed his mug down, his fingers brushing the rim. "Where are you from?" Anna asked, breaking the silence. She had been wondering, but the question felt out of place somehow. Still, her curiosity won out. The diplomat hesitated, his eyes momentarily drifting to the window. "I'm from a place far from here," he said softly. "A place that seems so different now." Anna tilted her head slightly, her curiosity piqued. "What happened?" The diplomat's eyes darkened. "I lost everything," he said quietly, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Anna didn't press him further, she could see the pain in his eyes. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, allowing the quiet to return between them. The atmosphere in the cafe shifted slightly, as the diplomat grew more withdrawn, lost in the weight of his thoughts. Anna could see the battle within him, the desire to speak, but the reluctance to reveal too much. She had been there herself, her own grief a constant companion. She sighed softly, feeling the weight of her own quiet suffering, when the sound of the door opening broke the moment. The wind rushed in, and a gust of cold air swept through the cafe. The diplomat flinched, startled by the intrusion. Anna turned her head, and as the door closed she saw a figure standing at the entrance, a man in a dark suit, his face hidden by shadows. He stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. There was something about him, a quiet confidence that immediately put Anna on edge. The diplomat stiffened, his eyes locking with the stranger. The stranger took a few steps toward their table, his gaze never leaving the diplomat. "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice calm but urgent. Anna's heart skipped a beat as she sensed the tension in the air. This wasn't a coincidence. The stranger stood at the entrance for a few moments, his presence casting a long shadow over the quiet cafe. The diplomat didn't move, his eyes locked with the man in the dark suit, his expression unreadable. Anna could feel the tension building, thick like the storm outside. The stranger didn't speak again, but his intent was clear. "I think we should go," the diplomat said suddenly, his voice quiet but firm, as if he had already made up his mind. Anna felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Go where?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. The diplomat stood up abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. "I don't have a choice," he said. There was a sudden coldness in his tone, as if he had shifted into a different person altogether. He glanced at her once more, his eyes softened. "I'll be fine, don't worry about me." Anna opened her mouth to protest, but before she could, the stranger stepped forward, placing a hand on the diplomat's shoulder with a firm grip. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. The diplomat stiffened under the man's touch but didn't pull away. Anna watched as the diplomat reluctantly followed the stranger outside, the door swinging shut behind them. Her heart raced in her chest, a growing sense of dread flooding her thoughts. She hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated that a simple act of kindness would lead her into something much darker. The street outside was still slick with rain, the glow of streetlights casting long, flickering shadows. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, but before she could step outside, the barista called her name. "Are you sure you want to go out there?" the barista asked, her voice tinged with concern. Anna hesitated. The storm outside mirrored the uncertainty building in her chest. "I have to," she said, her voice shaking slightly. She pushed the door open and stepped out into the rain, the cool air hitting her face like a slap. The diplomat and the stranger were already several steps ahead, their figures outlined in the dim streetlight. She hesitated, unsure of what to do next, but one thing was clear. She couldn't let the diplomat face whatever this was alone. Anna quickened her pace, her heart pounding as she followed the two men through the rain. The diplomat's footsteps were quick, almost frantic, but the stranger remained calm, walking with purpose as though he were leading the way. Anna's mind raced with questions she couldn't answer, a growing sense of panic settling in her chest. "Where are you taking him?" Anna called out, her voice cutting through the sound of the rain. The stranger didn't answer immediately. He continued walking, his long strides eating up the distance between them. The diplomat glanced back at her, his face hard, eyes distant. "You don't belong here," the stranger finally said, his voice low but firm. "This is not your business." Anna's anger flared, and she pushed through the rain, stepping in front of the diplomat. "I won't let you take him without knowing what's going on." The stranger stopped, his expression unreadable. "I told you," he said, his tone colder than before. "This is bigger than you think." Anna's eyes flickered to the diplomat, but he didn't meet her gaze. The cold realization hit her then. He had already made his choice. The stranger turned, his gaze fixed on Anna with an unsettling calmness. "You're wasting your time," he said flatly, as if the conversation was over before it had even begun. But Anna wasn't ready to give up. "I don't care who you are," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not letting you take him without understanding why." The stranger's lips twitched into the faintest of smirks. "You have no idea what you're involved in," he replied, his tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. Anna took a step forward, her jaw clenched. "Then tell me. I'm listening." For a moment, the stranger said nothing, his eyes narrowing slightly. He seemed to weigh his options before finally sighing. This man has information. Information that can change everything. If he walks away from this, the consequences will be catastrophic. Anna's eyes widened. What kind of information? She demanded. The stranger didn't answer immediately. He glanced at the diplomat, who still remained silent, his face unreadable. I'm not at liberty to explain, the stranger said, his voice colder than the rain. But trust me, it's for the greater good. Anna's mind spun with the stranger's words. But the diplomat's silence weighed on her more than anything. She didn't know who this man was, or what he meant by the greater good, but she could feel the danger looming just beyond the edges of the conversation. I don't care what's at stake, Anna said, her voice trembling with frustration. He deserves to know what's happening. The stranger turned to the diplomat, as if waiting for him to speak. But the diplomat's face remained cold, emotionless. I'm sorry, the diplomat said quietly, finally meeting Anna's eyes. I have to go with him. Her heart sank. The man she had tried to help, the man she thought she had connected with, was walking away. And there was nothing she could do to stop him. The stranger didn't say another word. He turned and began walking, the diplomat following silently behind him. Anna stood in the rain, watching them disappear into the night, her heart heavy with unanswered questions. The days following the diplomat's departure were a blur for Anna. Her mind kept drifting back to that rainy night, to the look in the diplomat's eyes when he chose to walk away with the stranger. She hadn't seen him since, and the unanswered questions gnawed at her, day and night. She tried to go about her routine, but everything seemed off. Every corner of the city, every familiar face, felt like a reminder of the choices she couldn't understand. On the third evening, as she walked home from the market, a familiar figure caught her eye. It was the diplomat, standing in the shadow of an alley, watching her approach. She stopped short, her heart skipping a beat. I thought you were gone, Anna said, her voice trembling with a mixture of surprise and relief. The diplomat's face was shadowed, his eyes tired, but there was a glimmer of something. Guilt, regret, hidden deep within them. I shouldn't have left you that night, he said, stepping closer. But I had no choice. Anna's mind raced as she tried to understand what he meant, but before she could ask, he lowered his voice, his words almost a whisper. I need your help. The diplomat took a hesitant step closer, his eyes scanning the street nervously, as if afraid someone might be watching. Anna's mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening, but the diplomat's presence alone was enough to make her heart race. I don't understand, Anna said, her voice softer now, trying to process his sudden reappearance. What kind of help do you need? The diplomat glanced over his shoulder again before speaking, his voice barely above a whisper. I've made some enemies, Anna, people who won't stop until they get what they want. His words sent a chill down her spine. She took a step forward, her eyes locked onto his. What do they want from you? The diplomat swallowed, his expression hardening. It's not just about me. It's about what I know. Anna's mind raced. She could feel the weight of his words, the gravity of his situation, but she still couldn't understand why he had come to her, why he trusted her enough to ask for help. What do you need me to do? She asked, the question hanging in the air thick with uncertainty. The diplomat hesitated for a moment before speaking again, his voice low and urgent. There's a document, a file. It's hidden, and I need you to get it for me. Anna's brow furrowed. A file, what's in it? The diplomat's gaze grew distant as he spoke, his words heavy with gravity. The truth, the kind of truth that people will kill to keep hidden. Anna's mind raced, but she didn't interrupt. She had already known that whatever this was, it wasn't going to be simple. The file's in a safe house, he continued. I've arranged for you to get in, but you'll need to be careful. There are people watching, people who don't want this to see the light of day. Anna felt a chill in her spine, but her determination pushed through. Where is it? What do I need to do? The diplomat looked at her, his eyes full of both fear and hope. I'll give you the address. But once you go in, you're on your own. They'll be looking for you too. Anna took a deep breath, her decision made. I'll do it, she said, the words firm. There was no turning back now. Anna spent the next few hours in a haze, her mind running over every detail the diplomat had given her. The file, the safe house, the danger, everything felt like a whirlwind of chaos she couldn't control. But one thing was clear. She couldn't back down. Not now. She knew the risks. The diplomat had made it clear that once she entered the safe house, she would be alone. But she also knew that if she didn't act, the truth would stay buried, and the consequences would be far worse than she could imagine. With the address in hand and the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, Anna found herself standing in front of the building. It was old, worn, and unremarkable, just another piece of the city's forgotten past. But to her, it was everything. She took a deep breath, then pushed the door open. Inside, everything was dark, and the air smelled of dust and neglect. But Anna didn't hesitate. She knew what she had to do. As she moved deeper into the building, her heart raced, and her senses heightened. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she wondered if anyone was watching. But she couldn't stop now. The interior of the building was silent, save for the soft echo of Anna's footsteps as she moved cautiously through the dim hallway. The air was thick with dust, and the flickering light from a broken bulb overhead cast long shadows on the wall. She checked the address again, confirming that this was the right place. The door at the end of the hall was ajar, and Anna hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. Inside, the room was sparse, a simple desk sitting in the center with a few chairs scattered around. There was no sign of anyone. But as Anna stepped further inside, she froze. The file. It was there, sitting on the desk, exactly where the diplomat had said it would be. But just as she moved toward it, the sound of footsteps behind her made her heart race. She spun around, but it was too late. A figure stepped into the room, blocking the door. The stranger, from the cafe. The same man who had led the diplomat away that night. Oh. His eyes locked onto hers, and his lips curled into a faint smile. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Anna stood frozen as the stranger moved closer, his presence overwhelming the small, dimly lit room. His gaze never wavered from her, and a thin, almost predatory smile curved his lips. Anna could feel her heart hammering in her chest, the file just within reach, but seemingly so far out of her grasp now. "You shouldn't have come," the stranger repeated, his voice calm but tinged with a quiet menace. Anna didn't respond immediately, but her thoughts raced. She had made it this far, and there was no turning back now. She had to get the file, had to understand what was so dangerous about it. "You don't know what you're dealing with," he continued, stepping into the room with slow, deliberate movements. "There are things in that file that could ruin everything." Anna's eyes narrowed. "If they're so dangerous, why don't you tell me what's in it?" The stranger's smile faltered for a split second, but then he shook his head. "That's not how this works." With one final step, he closed the distance between them, his shadow falling over her like a shroud. Anna took a deep breath, bracing herself. She wouldn't back down now. The stranger's eyes linger on Anna for a moment longer, the silence stretching between them like a taut wire. He didn't need to say another word. His presence alone was enough to convey the weight of the threat hanging in the air. Anna's fingers grazed the edge of the file, the paper cold under her touch, but she didn't dare make a move. "Are you going to stop me?" Anna finally asked, her voice steady, though her pulse was racing. The stranger raised an eyebrow, the faintest hint of amusement flickering across his face. "You don't understand. If you take that file, you're signing your death sentence." Anna's hand tightened around the file, the thought of walking away gnawing at her. But something deep inside told her that this was the only way forward. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, though her words were firm. The stranger let out a soft chuckle. "You should be." And with that, the tension snapped. The stranger lunged toward her, his movements fast and fluid, but Anna was ready. She ducked to the side, narrowly avoiding his outstretched hand, and grabbed the file, holding it tightly to her chest. Anna stumbled back, the file still clutched in her hands. She could hear the stranger's heavy breathing as he quickly regained his balance and came at her again. This time, Anna was ready. She darted to the side, moving with a speed she didn't know she had. Her instincts were taking over, and fear no longer held her in place. She needed to get out. The door behind her was just a few steps away, but she knew the stranger wouldn't give up easily. He was closing in on her again, his fingers just inches away from her arm. The sound of her own breath was loud in her ears, and her heart was pounding, but she refused to let the file fall into his hands. "Stop running," the stranger growled, his voice low and threatening. Anna ignored him, her feet carrying her faster toward the door. As she reached it, she swung it open, only to find two more men standing on the other side, their eyes cold and calculating. She froze. "Shit," she muttered under her breath. There was no way out now. She was surrounded. Anna's mind raced as she tried to think of a way out. The file in her hands felt like a weight she couldn't carry, but it was all that stood between her and whatever fate these men had planned. The two newcomers didn't move, their eyes locked on her with unblinking intensity. The stranger in the room stepped forward, closing the gap between them. "This is over," he said, his voice low and certain. "Give me the file." Anna's chest tightened as she realized she had no more options. There was no escaping through the door now, and fighting her way through all three men seemed impossible. But something inside her refused to give up. "No," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I won't let you control this." The stranger's eyes narrowed as he took another step forward. "You don't have a choice." But Anna's hand tightened around the file. She wouldn't back down. "I do," she said, her voice unwavering. And with that, she moved to the side and bolted for the window. Her only chance now was to escape before they could close in on her completely. Anna's heart raced as she ran for the window, her breath coming in quick gasps. The file was still pressed against her chest, but she could feel her strength waning with every step. She reached the window and shoved it open with all her might. The cool night air rushed in, and for a moment she could taste freedom. But just as she was about to climb through, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching. The stranger's voice cut through the night air. "You can't outrun this, Anna." She paused, her fingers gripping the window frame, and for the first time, she questioned what she was doing. Was she making the right choice? There was no turning back now. Without another thought, she pulled herself through the window, landing in the alley below with a roll to cushion her fall. Pain shot through her body, but she ignored it. The chase had begun. The rain had stopped, but the air was still thick with tension. Anna stumbled through the dark alley, her breathing ragged as she tried to put as much distance between herself and the building. Her heart raced, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. She could hear nothing but the sound of her own footsteps echoing off the wet pavement. She wasn't sure where she was going, but it didn't matter. She needed to get away. As she turned a corner, she suddenly stopped. There in front of her was a familiar figure. The diplomat. He stood there, bathed in the dim light of a street lamp, his silhouette barely visible in the shadow of the buildings. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, neither of them moved. "Anna," he said softly, his voice full of regret. "I didn't want you to get involved in this." Anna felt a lump form in her throat. "Then why did you come to me?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. The diplomat's eyes flickered with pain. "Because I didn't have anyone else, and now I've put you in danger." The diplomat stepped closer, his gaze never leaving Anna. "You don't know what you're dealing with," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. "There are people who will stop at nothing to get that file. It's not just about me anymore. It's bigger than both of us." Anna's heart thudded in her chest. She could hear the urgency in his words, but her confusion only deepened. "Then what do you want me to do?" The diplomat hesitated, looking at the ground for a moment. When he looked back up, his eyes were filled with determination. "We need to destroy it. The file. It's the only way to keep everyone safe." Anna swallowed hard, trying to comprehend what he was asking. "But you said it could change everything. It could expose the truth." "Some truths are better left buried," he said, his voice firm. "This isn't something we can fix, Anna. This is something we have to end." Anna stood there, frozen, as the gravity of the diplomat's words settled in. She had thought that finding the truth would give her the answers she needed, but now she was faced with a decision that could change everything. Should she destroy the file, burying the truth, or expose it to the world, regardless of the consequences? The diplomat's voice broke through her thoughts. Anna, I'm asking you to trust me. She turned to look at him, her eyes filled with doubt. How can I trust you? You came to me with secrets, with lies. You've already dragged me into this mess. His face softened with guilt. I never meant to hurt you, but this is bigger than both of us. If you expose this, it will destroy lives. Anna's fingers tightened around the file, her resolve wavering. And if I destroy it, what then? What happens to me? He stepped closer, his expression pleading. You'll be free. No one will come after you. You can go back to your life. Anna paused, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she had to make. A sudden noise echoed in the distance, a car engine revving, and Anna snapped out of her trance. The diplomat's words were still fresh in her mind, but now there was something more pressing. She looked over her shoulder, anxiety creeping into her chest. We don't have much time, the diplomat said, his voice urgent. We need to decide now. Anna felt a surge of panic. There was no more time to think, no more time to weigh the options. The decision had to be made, and it had to be made now. Can't destroy it, she said, her voice trembling. I can't live with that. The diplomat's face tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he grabbed her arm gently, pulling her toward the street. Then we run, he said, his tone resolute. We get out of here. The file will never see the light of day. Anna didn't resist. She knew they had no other choice. They ran, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty alley as they raced toward the unknown. The city felt like it was closing in on them as they ran down the wet streets, the sound of their hurried footsteps mingling with the distant roar of the car engine that seemed to follow them. The diplomat's hand was firm on her arm, guiding her forward with a sense of purpose. Anna's mind was racing, her heart pounding in her chest, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. Everything had changed in a matter of moments. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a car parked in the shadows. The diplomat didn't hesitate, pulling open the passenger side door and gesturing for Anna to get in. Come on, he urged, his voice strained with urgency. Anna hesitated for only a second before climbing in. The diplomat slammed the door shut behind her and ran around to the driver's side. The engine roared to life, and they sped off into the night, leaving behind the life they once knew, not knowing what lay ahead. But one thing was certain, they couldn't go back. Not now. The car sped down the dark, empty roads, the headlights cutting through the rain-soaked night. Anna sat in the passenger seat, her hands gripping the seatbelt, her mind racing as they left the city behind. The diplomat was focused on the road, his face tight with tension, his hands gripping the steering wheel like he was holding on for dear life. Where are we going? Anna finally asked, her voice quiet but urgent. The diplomat glanced at her, his eyes briefly meeting hers before returning to the road. Somewhere safe. We need to lay low for a while. Anna nodded, her fingers still clenched on the seat. The weight of their escape was heavy in the air, but there was something else too, something unspoken. She could feel it between them, the tension, the unrelenting pressure that came with running from the truth. Do you think they'll stop looking for us? Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The diplomat didn't answer right away. They won't stop until they get what they want, he said grimly, his gaze fixed ahead. But we'll do everything we can to stay ahead. Anna looked out the window, the dark landscape passing by in a blur. There was no going back now. Hours passed, and the rain had only worsened. The road ahead was nothing but a blur of lights and dark streaks. The diplomat didn't seem to care, driving with a purpose. But Anna's mind was elsewhere, her thoughts swirling with the same questions that had plagued her since the beginning. What's really in that file? She asked suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet tension in the car. The diplomat's grip on the steering wheel tightened, but he didn't answer right away. He knew what she was asking, but he was reluctant to share the truth. I told you, he said finally, his voice low. It's not something you need to know. It's too dangerous. Anna's gaze remained fixed on him. I'm already in danger, aren't I? He nodded slowly, his eyes flicking to her for a brief moment. Yes, you are, but some things are better left unknown. Anna's mind raced. She could feel the truth just beyond her reach, but the diplomat's refusal to tell her only made her more determined. I can't live with not knowing, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The diplomat didn't respond, but the tension in the car grew thicker, heavier, as the storm outside raged on. The storm raged on as they drove deeper into the countryside, the road now winding through thick trees and fog. Anna's anxiety only grew the further they went, but the diplomat remained focused, his eyes trained on the road ahead. Are we almost there? Anna asked, her voice tense, her fingers drumming against her knee. We're close, the diplomat replied without looking at her. We'll stay off the main roads for now. It's safer this way. Anna nodded, though her mind was still a whirlwind of questions. Do you trust these people we're going to? The diplomat glanced at her for a moment, his face unreadable. I trust them enough, he said slowly. But trust doesn't mean safety, not in this world. Anna's heart skipped a beat at the coldness of his words. Then why are we going there? He didn't answer, and the silence between them was suffocating. Anna knew better than to push further. She had already crossed the point of no return, and there was no way back now. The only thing left to do was keep moving forward. Eventually, the car slowed as they reached a small nondescript cabin tucked away at the edge of a forest. It was quiet here, the only sound the gentle rustle of the trees in the wind. Anna felt a sense of unease settle in her chest as the diplomat pulled the car up to the cabin's door. This is it, he said, turning off the engine and glancing at her. Anna didn't answer. She was too busy surveying the area, looking for any signs of danger, though the cabin seemed peaceful, almost too peaceful. Are you sure about this? Anna asked, her voice low. I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore. The diplomat opened his door, stepping out into the damp night air. He turned to look at her, his face unreadable. This is the only option we have left, he said quietly. Anna took a deep breath before getting out of the car. The cold air hit her immediately, and she pulled her coat tighter around her, but it did little to ease the unease in her gut. They were both walking into the unknown, and it felt like the walls were closing in. They stepped into the cabin, the door creaking as it opened, revealing a small, dimly lit interior. The air was musty, and the floorboards creaked under their feet as they entered. Anna took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that clung to her like a second skin. The diplomat moved silently through the cabin, flicking on lights and checking the rooms. We'll stay here for a while, he said, his voice low, but there was a sense of finality to it. Anna didn't say anything in response. She was too busy scanning the room, her instincts telling her that this place wasn't as safe as it seemed. The diplomat returned to her side, his eyes scanning the room as well. We'll be okay here, he said, but Anna could hear the uncertainty in his voice. She turned to him, her eyes searching his face. Do you really believe that? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat down at the small wooden table, his expression distant. I have to, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Anna sat across from him, the tension between them thick in the air. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside was just beginning. The night dragged on in the cabin, the only sound the occasional crack of wood in the fireplace. Anna sat on the couch, her eyes unfocused as she stared into the flames, her thoughts a whirlpool of uncertainty. The diplomat was across from her, his face a mask of quiet contemplation. Neither of them spoke much, both lost in their own fears and frustrations. Finally, the silence was broken. I never should have dragged you into this, the diplomat said, his voice low, almost guilty. You were safe before. Now, everything's changed. Anna looked up at him, her expression unreadable. You don't get to decide what's best for me, she replied, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. I chose to help you. That's on me, not you. The diplomat met her gaze, a flicker of something, regret, perhaps, or understanding, passing through his eyes. "I don't know what's going to happen next," he said softly, "but I won't let them hurt you. I'll do whatever it takes." Anna nodded, though doubt still lingered in her chest. They were both in this together now, whether they liked it or not. The quiet of the cabin was suddenly shattered by the sound of a car pulling up outside. Both Anna and the diplomat stood in unison, their senses immediately alert. The diplomat motioned for Anna to stay back as he crept toward the window, peeking through the blinds. "They found us," he whispered, his voice laced with tension. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She could hear the sound of footsteps approaching the cabin, the crunch of gravel underfoot. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to stay calm. The diplomat turned, his expression grim. "More of the people I've been running from. They'll do whatever it takes to get the file." Anna's chest tightened. She knew they couldn't stay here any longer. "What do we do?" The diplomat's eyes locked with hers. "We run. Now." Without another word, they quickly moved to the back of the cabin, the door creaking as they slipped into the dark woods surrounding them. The darkness of the woods swallowed them as they ran, their feet crunching over the wet earth. The air was thick with the smell of pine and damp leaves, but Anna barely noticed. Her focus was entirely on the diplomat, who led the way through the dense forest, his pace unrelenting. "How much further?" Anna gasped, her breath coming in quick, sharp bursts. The diplomat didn't answer immediately, his focus ahead. The only sounds now were their footsteps and the distant noise of the men chasing them. "Not far," he said, his voice firm, though Anna could hear the edge of fear in it. "We have to get to the old barn. It's not much, but it'll be enough to hide us for a while." Anna nodded, though her legs were starting to feel like lead. She pushed herself harder, trying to keep up, the fear of being caught gnawing at her. The sounds of pursuit were getting closer. They were running out of time. "Keep going," the diplomat urged, glancing over his shoulder for a split second. "We're almost there." After what felt like an eternity, the barn came into view, its silhouette barely visible against the night sky. The diplomat's pace quickened, and Anna pushed herself harder, the adrenaline coursing through her veins. They reached the barn just as the sounds of their pursuers grew louder, too close for comfort. The diplomat reached the door first, pulling it open with a creak that sounded deafening in the quiet of the night. "Get inside," he hissed, his voice urgent. Anna didn't hesitate. She slipped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim interior. The barn smelled of hay and dust, the only light coming from the small cracks in the wood where the moonlight filtered through. The diplomat followed her in, and quickly shut the door, his eyes scanning the darkness. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Anna nodded, her heart racing as she tried to steady her breath. They were safe, for now, but she knew it wouldn't last. They had to come up with a plan, quickly. The barn was eerily silent, the only sounds the occasional rustle of the wind outside, and the soft creak of the building settling. Anna sat in the corner, her hands resting on her knees, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She had no idea how long they could stay hidden in the barn, or what their next move would be. But one thing was certain, they couldn't keep running forever. The diplomat sat beside her, his face grim as he surveyed the surroundings. "We need a plan," he said quietly, his voice strained. Anna nodded, her fingers twitching nervously. "But what's the plan? We can't keep running. We have the file and they'll never stop coming after us." The diplomat met her gaze, his eyes filled with determination. "We fight. We expose them. The file has to go to the right people. We just have to make sure it gets to them safely." Anna didn't speak, but her heart pounded in her chest. The weight of their situation was starting to sink in. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice.